listeners, and welcome to another episode of Get Smarter, an LCE podcast. Thanks for joining me today. We have a very special episode. Today, we're going to talk about some practical insights and guidance on how to build resilience in manufacturing through effective, what we call operational readiness. This is a combination of strong asset management and reliability methodologies and the integration of a smart culture around reliability and technology. So today I'm joined by Mike Smith. Mike Smith manages our reliability engineer SMEs, but he's also a tenured expert himself with over 30 years experience in managing plant and corporate reliability and maintenance programs. One of his specialties is using reliability-centered maintenance and failure modes effects analysis, or we'll call them FMEAs as we talk about them during this episode, to help determine design criteria that maximize reliability of capital projects, but also mitigate risks of equipment failure during operation. So Mike Smith, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Great. So there's tons of capital projects and expansions out there, new plants, new facilities being built all across North America, all across the world, really. And in today's episodes, we're going to talk about that journey to operational readiness, and how facilities and operations can put their best foot forward in the design and in the design and the commissioning phases of those projects. So let's jump right in. Mike, can you talk to me about the importance of operational readiness and how it differs from just getting a plant, a greenfield up and running?
Well, operational readiness is all about making sure that you have everything in place that the operators and the craftsmen are going to need to be successful. You know, we've all seen plants that they spend millions of dollars, they put a piece of equipment in, and lo and behold, it doesn't perform for whatever reason. And what operational readiness is all about is taking that type of problem out of your business.
Mm-hmm.
It's about making sure that you have the right types of processes and procedures in place, that you have people trained, that you have the skill sets necessary to perform the tasks that you're going to ask people to perform, that you're going to have the right tools. You know, we've all seen situations where we go into a job and we don't have the right tools because we
Right.
never planned it. And having the right documentation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, many times you'll see a plant try to start up and they don't have even the basics of prints ready to go. And you can't operate and maintain a piece of equipment without prints. Having those right procedures, you know, making sure that the operational procedures are in place, that maintenance job plans and documentation of all different kinds are set up and in place. The other thing is understanding what are your most critical pieces of equipment, those that really face the highest risk in impacting your overall performance, and that we definitely put our best foot forward on those pieces of equipment, and develop the best maintenance strategies, both from operational inspections, maintenance inspections, predictive analysis, PMs, installed sensors, whatever the best package forward is.
Right.
Because what we want to do is we want to hit the ground running in the smooth operations, that we've designed it properly.
Mm-hmm.
We've made sure that we've addressed all the risks that we can in the design, that we know how to commission it. We go through our commissioning process, and then when we start the product or the production line up, we're making a quality product safely, meeting all the environmental requirements at the type of profit that we were expecting out of the new piece of equipment.
So meeting all of those, meeting all those expectations.
That's right. It's you know, in a simple word, it's doing it right. It's probably the
Well,
easiest way to look at it.
that is the easiest way to look at it. And, I'll give a shout out to our founder, Jim Fye. Do the right thing the right way, right? And that's the life cycle engineering, one of life cycle engineering's values. So we go in and we try to help educate, our customers on what that right thing is. And I want to talk about that a little bit more because you said, you've said some things that I think are maybe common mistakes or, common issues that companies make during planning and execution phases. And it makes it so they're failing to meet those budget and schedule goals. Can you share with me what some of those common pitfalls are, that organizations make in these early phases?
Well, I would have to say that the biggest overall problem is we have two silos of people.
Okay.
We have one silo that has the capital people, and they're focusing on getting it in under budget, making sure that it's finished on the schedule. Then you have the other side, which is your people that are going to be in the operational phase. And unfortunately, quite often the two don't talk, and
Mm,
they have different metrics, if you will, of importance. Again, if you're a capital person, quite often it's budget, schedule
budget
time.
schedule.
And then on the operational side, the goal is to be able to make a smooth operational transition. It's commissioned properly, and you make a product that meets your quality safely and at a profit level that you were expecting. And because they don't talk quite often, things get dropped, missed. There was a situation one time where I have seen people put in a piece of equipment that you can't access. I got asked to go look at a plant one time, and I walked out there, and there was a guy swinging from a basket hanging from a crane,
Oh my gosh.
150 feet up in the air, calibrating an opacity meter,
That's not
which is
where I
an
want to be on a
environmental material.
Monday.
Well, that was kind of the way I looked at it. And it was all because nobody had ever thought was building a platform and steps or ladders or whatever the right appropriate way to do, but to give that individual access to perform that calibration because it was required um, by their Title IX or Title V, and they had to do it, but they'd never taken the time to think, how can we do it? And I've seen other situations happen because we didn't even take the time to label things. I saw a situation where a, uh, a lubrication tank was not labeled. So when the company came to fill the tanks, they didn't know exactly which ones to do, so they put hydraulic fluid in it. And lo and behold, they had a major failure
Oh boy.
just a couple of days after they had started to operate it, all because something wasn't labeled. And those are kind of gross examples,
Hmm.
but by not talking to each other, look at the issues they could have easily solved.
Completely preventable. Completely
Very much
preventable.
so. Preventable and not expensive to fix.
Right, right. If you do it up front.
That's right. And that's why I want to break down those silos. And one of the key ways to do that is doing some type of a design FMEA where
Hmm.
you actually go through and you identify all the risks to the project or from that piece of equipment or asset or process, however you want to do it, and put in place mitigating strategies. Because if you can change the design to take a failure mode out, it is much cheaper and much more effective overall to address it while you're still in the design phase, as opposed to waiting till you're in the operational maintaining phase, where you spend repetitive expense money until you can fix it. And
And
that's just an
time, yeah.
expensive way. That's just an expensive way to do business.
Design it out instead of
Bingo. That's exactly right.
maintaining it out. But I love what you said about, breaking down those silos. And I think it's there is that focus each stakeholder, has their measures, but they don't have to be diametrically opposed. They
Yeah.
can be coordinated, um and by bringing people together, they can see how their different focuses can actually work together for a better product. And I think maybe that FMEA process, getting all those people together and seeing, you know, how their expertise can contribute to identifying those things that can be designed out, or assuming the risk, but understanding from all sides of the business what that means, right?
Well, and you made a really good point. Getting these people together of different skill sets, different points of view, and things like that to address these problems. Because, you and I are different people and we see things differently. But when you think of something and I think of something, meshing those thoughts together, quite often it's one plus one is equal to three.
Yeah.
And that's one of the advantages of doing these FMEAs early in the phase of design. You can't get those issues driven out of your business early on. And if you think about it, it's always cheaper to design out a problem than it is to maintain out a problem.
So, could you share with me some other ways that taking what we've been talking about now, and what we at Lifecycle call risk-based asset management? Can you share more about how a risk-based asset management plan or approach can really help you manage operational risks just at large, especially in the design and commissioning phases? We've been
Okay,
talking a little bit about it. Just let's go a little deeper.
sure. Well, risk-based asset management is all about identifying risks and taking them out of the business. That's it in a nutshell. And the first thing that you must understand is, what are your most critical pieces of equipment? And when
Hmm.
you look at those risks to develop, your most critical engineering, it's not just safety and environmental. It's not quality. It's safety, environmental, quality, uh, the ability to produce it, profit margins, all of these things that come into reputation.
Reputation.
Certainly. These are things that come into play to identify risks and make sure that you identify the piece of equipment that has the most risks.
Most risk,
Because
yeah.
because then you want to take those and truly make sure that you knock those out of the park.
That's where you spend your time.
That's for time and money, and
Time and money.
basically it's where you give your most love.
Ah, I love that. I like that. I love that. That's where you give your
Yeah, there
most
you
love.
go. But it makes sense to do that, but
Hmm.
you've got to do it in a way that is very systematic, that those are identified and that you can attack them. And that's the start of a risk-based process. So once you identify those risky pieces of equipment and define the highest criticality, if you will, then you would do things like an FMEA, which is a failure mode and effect analysis. And it's a deep dive to understand, how can the equipment fail? What are those failure modes? How does it manifest itself? So that you can put in place some type of activity that mitigates that risk. Now, if you're
Hmm.
doing it early in the design phase, which is, by far the best time to start doing this, you can design them out relatively easy in most cases. So you want to do that and identify those risks and start driving them out of the business, making a design change, putting in place, for example, if you've got a piece of rotating equipment, air compressor,
Hmm.
putting in place something that measures the vibration and the temperature and things like that, where you have installed sensors. Now, I probably wouldn't put installed sensors on one of the lower criticality pieces of equipment. But if I've got a very critical piece of equipment where having that real time, I may want to use installed sensors as my one of my risk mitigating strategies.
Hmm.
So it's really important to do it up front, because, and if you can install sensors in the purchase order for the whatever compressor,
For the piece of equipment, yeah.
yeah, whatever equipment it is, it becomes much cheaper to do that. And most companies will install them for you up front, and then it's setting up your process around those. Becomes much more successful at a much lower price, but you have to identify it up front.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's go down the technology road.
Okay.
So let's how since we started to talk about sensors and condition based and monitoring and maintenance. So, in terms of technology, what should companies consider when they're implementing new technologies? And this could be, and I'd say we can expand it. During design for a capital project, or in a plant where you're already been in operations for you know 25, 50 years, and you're at that moment where you're like, it's time, it's past time. We're putting in technology. I mean, what are some considerations that need to be taken?
Well, I kind of look at it two ways. From an operational readiness standpoint,
Right.
again, let's focus on the most critical piece of equipment,
There you
pieces of
go.
equipment. Okay. Because you want to make sure that you're truly getting them set up for success.
Mm-hmm.
Then, from a standpoint of equipment that's already installed, make sure, again, that it's the most critical pieces of equipment,
Mm-hmm.
and let's start putting them in. But one of the key things that has to happen is it's installing a sensor or something like that is not just some magic fix. Okay. What it does is it provides you data. We have to put in place the process to make sure that when that data is generated, that we're in a position to maximize its effectiveness. Um, I've seen too many places where they spend, $1 million putting in sensors, but then they don't address the data from it in any way that they're getting machine learning or solving problems, and that's just not an effective use of it. However, companies that put these sensors in, I'm just using the vibration sensor as an example,
Sure, sure.
but they put those in and they have a process around how to start to identify failures coming from it. And they put in place ways with their planning and scheduling that when they get that data coming in that's indicating a potential failure, that they actively address it. Those companies truly benefit from it and can make a tremendous impact financially. It's all, you have to have the whole package, not just the sensors. You have to have the process and the mindset of addressing it.
I think that's very important piece there. You have to have the foundations, and you have to be ready for it. It's almost like what we were talking about, earlier, in terms of making sure you have your documentation in place so that you know how to
Very,
operate and you know how to
that's
maintain
right.
these new assets that you have. So let's talk a little bit about the people side, which you kind of alluded to there. Um, when you're talking about a new facility, a new system, an expansion, a new asset. What are some key factors that we have to keep in mind for our workforce? And how important, the workforce is, having the right people in place or developing the people. Can you talk to me a little bit more about your thoughts on that?
Well, if we don't develop our people, we're doing a disservice to the company and to them. So, one of the things that we have to do is define up front how many people are we going to need? And what are the skill sets that those individuals are going to need?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, in most cases in today's world, we have to provide that. Okay. Certainly from an operational standpoint, because in most cases, we may be the only one who has that type of a production system.
Exactly. Exactly.
So we have to develop these processes and procedures and guide them through a training process to make their level of expertise up to what we need. That's a little different in the maintenance craft organization, because in many cases you can find people that have existing skill sets,
Hmm.
millwrights, welders, electricians, instrument techs, things like that. However, sometimes we can't. If you're in a place that has a high level of that type of personnel around, craft personnel, Houston, for example, has a lot of craft people, then you may be able to actually hire some level. But if it's in a greenfield area that doesn't have that skill set, you probably are not going to be able to. So in many cases, you have to identify those skill sets up front and develop your people into those skill sets.
Right.
One of the things I've found that works out fairly well is working with a local tech school. Quite
Hmm.
often, they will help you in this way, and that's for your operations and craftsmen. The other thing that you've got to understand is making sure that you have managers and engineers that are trained properly to understand this type of a system,
Yes,
whatever you're putting up.
reliability and maintenance professionals. Yep.
That's right, because most engineers coming right out of college don't have that type of background, and in many cases, most managers don't. And so we need to make sure that the managers and the engineers who are going to be leading this effort, that they have the skill sets necessary to teach and coach. So it's all about defining what you need and then making sure that we provide that to our team, right? And that's from the plant manager down to his directs, the engineers, the craftsmen, the supervisors, the
The maintenance
operators.
managers,
That's
supervisors.
right.
Yeah.
Because every one of them is going to be new to this plant or process. So we have to develop them and give them the tools they need.
Well, and it's one of the reasons, Mike, and in addition to, being manager of our reliability engineering subject matter experts, you also are a facilitator for the Institute, the Life Cycle Institute. And, just what you were talking about was one of the reasons why the Institute developed the certification programs that we have for reliability engineers, maintenance managers, and professional planners and planning managers. And we, with our university partners, we're trying to lift that up as critical to operations, is to prepare these professionals to deliver that value that from our assets and from our people.
And I'll be honest, it's probably one of the most important things that we do at Lifecycle.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, because if you think about it, when we're working with a company, say it's operational readiness,
Hmm.
if if they do not have the people that are in place to be supportive, to help take the ball and run with it, it's a tough road. Whereas if we can provide that level of training and skill set development and things like that, which is what the certification programs do, because and I'll just speak with the reliability engineering one, you actually go perform a project, and
Hmm.
in many cases it's on a greenfield piece of equipment, and you do the full reliability analysis of it from hierarchical development, criticality, FMEAs, failure mode analysis. uh, you basically put in place the reliability necessary for that piece of equipment or process. So it's great experience for the folks going through it. And one of the things that always amazes me is how much they actually generate value wise to their company. When you're talking with someone that's going through this process, and you tell them that you're saying you're going to save $20,000. But I think if you go talk to your accounting, you're probably in the $1 million range
Hmm.
because they don't recognize, things like lost production and things like that. But in operational readiness, if you delay a startup by a month, that is several $1 million.
That's huge, right?
And so having these people go through these certification projects, they're getting this equipment ready and following that defined process.
But also seeing the value that they're contributing to the organization, I mean, maintenance isn't fix it when it breaks, man. And it's a huge contributing value proposition there. And that's I think a lot of the reason why Lifecycle does everything that we do. We want to help people and operations reach their full potential. And we have that combination you were talking about. I think some of our most fun projects are in the operational readiness because it's so exciting to see something brand new, going to go into production or, turning the lights on. And but like you said, it's that lasting contribution of being able to equip people to where they're making those differences when we're gone, because and you do this work all the time. What do you think is, before I wrap this up, what do you think is one of the, I don't know, the best things about the type of work that you do?
Well, actually, you hit on it a few minutes ago. My actual favorite part of it is the reliability engineering certifications.
Oh yeah.
Because when you're reviewing what, in many cases, these folks that are developing their skill sets and their knowledge, and they're gone through a process and a project, and they're putting in place things to happen, and to watch in a sense, the light bulb going off, if you will,
Hmm.
when they suddenly realize that what they're doing is impacting their company in a very significant way. Because you think about it, and I see situations where people think they're saving the company $20,000, but it's often over $1 million because they didn't recognize all that. And to suddenly see these people recognize the value that they are generating for their company, you know, quite often you'll see them end up having to make a presentation to the president of the company. And, that's one of those things when you look back and say, yep, okay, we won that one.
We won that one. I love it. Well, Mike, we've talked about a lot today. We've talked about the critical role of early planning and a comprehensive operational readiness strategy. We've talked about risk-based asset management. We've talked about the need to develop your people. We've talked about the importance of having your data and your foundations in place before you integrate technology so that you can ensure you're ready and actually make use of that technology. The necessity of understanding your critical equipment. We said that probably like 10 times in our discussion today because it is. So that's your
Obviously.
risk. Yeah, that's defining your risk. So I've just had so much fun. Thanks a lot for joining me today, Mike.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, yeah, and I think our listeners are going to get a lot from our discussion today. But we are also going to post some additional resources in the episode notes. So please, listeners, go ahead and check that out. We'll be posting an article that's actually about operational readiness. That's pretty much hot off the press, and we'll list some other resources, free resources that you can take advantage of on lce.com. And if you're interested in those certifications, feel free to visit our Institute Marketplace to learn more about other results that people have gotten from those programs. And you never know, you might see Mike Smith in the classroom.
I look
So,
forward to it.
There you go. So, thanks, listeners, for joining me, and join me again on another episode of the Get Smarter podcast. So, until then, let's stay smarter, people.